I get a phone call from Carl, and he said, Kathi, you can't tell anybody, but we got it. We got it. And I went, oh no, we got it. Holy, I haven't been to a workshop about FASD since the 1990s.
Hello, everyone, and thanks again for joining us on POPFASD podcast series FASD through a variety of lenses. In this series this season, we took a look at FASD through a variety of perspectives in hopes to get a better understanding of how we can support our students in the classroom. Today, we're going to have a bonus episode. We're going to sit down with Stacey Wakabayashi, who's taught with POPFASD for 12 and a half years, and Kathi Hughes, who is one of the founding members of this program. And I'm excited to hear about POPFASD and how it has evolved and grown from this small program in northern BC to having an impact worldwide. In fact, we just reached over 233,000 views on the videos that we've uploaded, including we get about over a couple hundred visitors to our website each day. And each year we average about around 2,000 BC educators that we meet and support face-to-face. So this program has grown massively since its early inception. And I'm just excited to hear if this is kind of what they had planned and what led up to it being the program that it is today. All right, I'm excited. So why don't we start off by letting Stacey Wakabayashi introduce Kathi Hughes.
When I think about POPFASD, I think about Kathi Hughes. And I do want people to know that prior to coming to POPFASD, Kathi was a highly respected educator, not only in this district, but in the province, especially in the area of alternate education. And some people don't know that Kathi was the founding president of the BC Alt Ed Association and was president for many years. She was awarded the Hazel Davy award that was given out to a special educator annually through the Special Ed Association. And this blew me away. There's actually an award given every year to an alternate teacher in British Columbia for innovative work in Kathi's name.
Whoa.
And I'm still alive.
Yeah. Do you remember when I first saw that poster that said the Kathi Hughes Innovative Award? Yeah. My comment to her was, don't you have to be dead to get one of those? So I just want people to know that was her history. So she had she was well known provincially prior to coming to POPFASD, but in my belief, POPFASD was her greatest legacy.
Okay, but I do have to jump in because something like the POPFASD team only works as a team. And we had amazing support from our administrator, Carl Ansarello, who really spearheaded and put all his vision into the inception of the program. And not only that, but we had incredible support from Bill Standeven from the Ministry of Education. I mean, he took a gamble.
Yes.
You know, we were just these little kids out in the outpost. And he just said, you guys can do this.
Yeah, and I remember that original proposal. And Stacey knows because our first team gathering, and I've done this every year, is I pull out that original proposal document because it's such a forward-thinking document, something that was written in, I guess it was 2005, probably. And there are still aspects of that proposal that we are still getting to. And so just the ideas that he was thinking about then around using technology to deliver this information, we're doing so much of now. And having, a repository of resources, through a website is something that we're very close to having, a revamped way for educators to find resources. So such a great document.
So I'm curious, back in 2006, did the Ministry of Education come out and say we want a number of different provincial outreach programs? And did that kind of spearhead and start POPFASD as well as Pop Art and the other POPs? Okay, or was it the brainchild of Carl and yourself and proposing that to the Ministry of Ed?
Okay, and jump in anytime, Stacey. Historically, I tried to review this in my brain. And the first significant development, which really spurred the formation of the Provincial Outreach Program, was the new Canadian guidelines in 2005. So that was the Canadian guidelines for diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Each province then took those guidelines, those were Canadian guidelines, and said, okay, what are we going to do here in the world of education, working with the Ministry for Children and Family Development and Health. So it was a multi-pronged approach. At that time, there were 7 other provincial programs in operation. So the call for submission of expression of interest, that's embedded in my brain, went out in 2005 to every single school district in the province. And I remember getting a phone call from Carl Ansarello, who at that time was called Director of Student Services.
Yes.
In the olden days, we called it Special Ed. And Carl phoned me and he said, I got to talk to you about this. And so I went over and met with him, and I'd worked with Carl for years and years and years in my role as resource teacher for community-based and school-based alternative education. That job allowed me to interact greatly with the community, and we had a number of services and programs that were in community-based locations and interagency staff working together. So Carl called me. I went over to see Carl, and he said, we got to do this. We got to apply for this. But I will only do it if you agree to take the lead. So when you look at this wonderful document that basically Carl and I and a group of people wrote for the expression of interest, it really was a multifaceted document. And the question was, does this community have the capacity to host this program? Carl's job was to get together with school district and say, will the school district support the development of this program? But you can see all of Carl's rationale, philosophy, and orientation in the document.
Yeah.
Problem solving, integrated case management, positive approach, communication network, action plan. The big one, and what made it so different, was the steering committee.
Yes.
That we have representatives from, we went into a regional geo-cluster, and we created the geo-clusters in accordance with the Ministry of Health. So you've got the north, you've got the center, you've got Vancouver Island, you've got the lower mainland, and then you've got the Kootenays. We went with that model because, again, we wanted an integrated approach to working with teachers of kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So we really wanted that intercommunity connection. Then fast forward, so the proposal was written, and the Friday before spring break in 2006, I get a phone call from Carl, and he said, Kathi, you can't tell anybody, but we got it. We got it. Wow. And I went, oh no, we got it. Holy, I haven't been to a workshop about FASD since the 1990s with Kee Warner from White Crow.
Yeah.
We co-facilitated her presenting in the district. And it was like a workshop with 100 people. So I knew that there was a 3-day workshop happening in Burns Lake. And I bullied my way into the workshop through Anne. And at that time, CNC had an incredible program in Burns Lake, operated by Anne.
Garashi.
What a memory.
Yeah.
So I bullied my way into the workshop. My thought was, I'm an avid cross-country skier, and I can go out to Burns Lake, take this 3-day workshop, and ski. So I was in, and Anne let me in. So that was an excellent, excellent way for me to get caught up on the research, to learn about the guidelines, and to connect with people.
Yeah, and wasn't the steering committee, the original idea with the steering committee is that they would be a group that was only together for the first year or two of our existence, and then they were going to go away because then we would be okay. But what we found was how valuable that group was to us, because we were, at the time, 2 teachers, a tech and a half-time clerical, trying to develop this program without that information from all parts of the province. So the steering committee provided us with that and provided that guidance. But it was so valuable. It went from being in existence for 1 or 2 years to continuing to be in existence today and being a valuable part of what we do.
Has it always stayed the same number of members in the steering committee?
Yes. Yeah, because it was organized based on the health regions. That original organization is what we still do today.
Now, did you add anybody into the Kootenays?
Well, we did. So we had initially member Sue Thompson is our only original member who's a steering committee member left who's still with us. And what we did partway through is we brought in somebody else to help her because her interior area was so big, and so that's the area that Jennifer Turner from Rocky Mountain District has taken on.
Yeah, and since you mentioned Sue Thompson, I have to give her a positive stroke here. Sue is the first person from the steering committee who took the risk of asking Stacey and I to present our first workshop. Need I say more? It was our very first.
Yes,
and thank goodness it was Stacey with his hockey background, because I barely survived. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was a tough go. We had never presented together. We had never presented on FASD. It was the first presentation of the program.
And I had never presented ever before.
That's a lot of faith from Sue.
Oh, man, it was pretty high stress.
Kathi and Stacey, were there any other FASD experts that you can recall that really helped out at the beginning? Because you said this is your first presentation, your first kind of go at it. Were there any FASD experts that you consulted to kind of help?
Yeah, before Kathi responds to this, because I know there were a lot of people that helped her before even I came on board, is that one of the benefits, I think, of having Kathi in the role at that early stage was that she had the ability to bring these people in and to engage these people in what we were doing. And so for me, that was an amazing part of that early work and such an important part, because a big piece of what we were doing was to establish credibility, not only in the field of FASD, but in education as well. So
you have to imagine that, many of the people in the field were in a process of responding to and being really excited by the fact that we did have the guidelines. I mean, this was brand new. It's something that people have been advocating for years. But what Stacey mentioned about the community piece and being able to gather people together was largely based on a lot of the work I did with the BC Alt Ed Association. So I basically intuitively knew how to bring people together, and following Carl's model, focusing on the positive and the problem solving. And to this day, that's still my modus operandi for any volunteer work I do. So bringing that group together, but you also have to imagine that here we are, 2 neophyte startups from Prince George, being the experts in fetal alcohol. So we really did have to build our credibility. And we started that first summer. Stacey, Corey, and myself all went to parts or all of a 4-day training, which was given by Key Warner, and it was called White Crow.
Yes.
And so we went to that 4-day intensive training. The training was intensive because you were there as professionals, living and working and learning with families. So it wasn't like I was seeing the kid in the classroom, or Stacey was seeing the kid in the classroom, and then the door shut and you might talk to the parent. But this was living 24/7 with the families. And I think, so Key Warner was absolutely instrumental. And this is maybe jumping ahead. I was trying to think of perhaps the second summer when I went back for another training, and I took a student with me because she wanted to learn.
Yeah, you actually went to the White Crow camp.
Yes.
You actually went to their week-long camp. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember sitting and talking with Key Warner, the absolute guru, one of many gurus in British Columbia, and saying to her, Key, what can we do that's going to make a difference for teachers? And I brought out an old document that was called ICEL, instruction, curriculum, environment, learner. And I said, is this something that we can adapt? And she looked at it and she said, Kathi, absolutely not. She said, it's the learner first. And that was the birth of the learner, environment, instruction, curriculum document. And it was just that simple conversation with Key saying, no, you're a teacher, you focus on instruction, but we're talking about the kid. We're talking about the learner. So you must put the learner first. Yeah. And I think maybe that was that second year.
Yeah.
I think we had muddled around the first year.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to figure out how to make videos.
Yeah, that's right. So who else do you think about as far as the experts? Because we had some of the most prominent names in the field help us at that early stage.
I think for me, and again, Stacey and I went to Oregon for a training with Diane Melvin, and the connection with Diane was phenomenal. And I guess she reinforced one of my attitudes towards teaching, which is we have to think outside the box. We have to try differently, not harder. And that became embedded in my brain as the main message that I wanted POPFASD to have. And it was almost an oxymoron, because the ministry requires us to have such documented box-like responses to kids. And then we're saying to teachers, no, think outside the box. Yeah. Like, get away from the form and think about the kid. And what's going to work for the kid? What does the kid like to do? So it was kind of a mixed message, but Diane Melvin and her book, Trying Differently, Not Harder, were just so instrumental. Yeah. And Diane was always around to support us.
She really was. And what I remember about Diane is being in Portland, being in a very cool restaurant in downtown Portland. Kathi had wandered away somewhere, so it was just Diane and I at the table. And what I remember about that conversation is Diane looked at me and she said, Stacey, in this work that you're going to do, she said, you only need to share this one nugget of information. That's what she called it, a nugget of information. And then she held out her hand with her palm up and she said, the nugget is this. All you need to do is to make sure that educators understand FASD as a brain injury. And she said, if you share that one nugget of information, educators will know what to do with it. And so, that one statement has stayed in my head and has meant so much to the way POPFASD has evolved for all of us. And so that was such a pivotal moment for me. Yeah.
I think pivotal moment for you and for me as well. When I think about the number of years I have spent working as an educator in the school district, and prior to that at Burnaby Mental Health, trying to figure out kids' behaviors and just not getting a grasp. And in those days, we called the kids gray area. When I look now, wishing I knew then what I know now, it would have made such a difference in understanding the kids I was working with.
Yeah.
And it was that,
Yeah, and that's such a common response that we still get today from educators who are hearing this information for the first time. And it's amazing that kind of, you see them making that shift just as they're hearing the information. So it still holds true today. I think about some of those other names like Dr. Sterling Claren and his wife Sandra and how they helped us, and Jan Lutke, and all of these people who are so prominent in this field, and how willing they were to help us at that early stage.
And I think why they wanted to help us was they recognized that we didn't come across as experts. We came across as facilitators, and that was always our role, was to glean relevant information from the professionals around us and then present it in a way to educators that educators would understand. Mm-hmm. So when I flashed through in my brain the other day how many people helped us, and again, we're working inter-ministry, right? So we're working with health, and you mentioned Christine Lilly, Christine Locke, Sterling Claren, Liz Bredberg, and then there was Ministry for Children and Family Development. And Ann Fuller would come every year to district partner training and give us an update on what was going on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Key Warner, White Crow, Kenny from White Crow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so many experts. You mentioned Dr. Liz Bredberg, and I often think back to those times and how tough she was on us.
Oh man!
But for me, when I think back to what she shared with us, it was probably the most impactful feedback that I have ever been given. And when we got kind of approval on the message that we were giving and the way we were giving it from her, that's when I knew we were on the right path. And so as difficult as that was to get some of that feedback, because she was pretty blunt with us, it certainly helped us to move forward in the right way, and helped us to gain that credibility in the field.
So you have this small team coming out of Prince George.
Yep.
You're just getting started. You're getting all this support from different experts in the field. And what were some of the challenges and obstacles that you faced?
Well, I think Stacey mentioned that, everybody had an invested piece in this, and they had a way of doing things. And then again, you get these two neophytes who come in.
Yeah.
And so certainly Liz challenged us all the way through.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was good.
Yeah, and I think it's credibility that I remember, because I remember our very first district partner training days. I don't know if you remember that, but I is so vividly burned into my head, feeling so intimidated. 2 teachers with limited knowledge of FASD running a 2-day training with a room full of people who likely had more information about FASD than we did. And we struggled through that first day. And I remember at the end of it, the district partners, we could hear them talking, and they were kind of questioning, who are these 2? But what I remember, and I think for me this was a turning point, was the next day, was day 2. Because on day 2 we had Diane Melvin speak, and she brought it all together. And so the district partners went, oh, I hear what they're saying or what they're trying to do. And after Diane spoke, she really brought everyone together. And then we brought out our leak page for the first time. And remember how long it took us, because we didn't have printed copies. We drew the leak page on chart paper. I don't know, we had probably made 20 copies of those on great big chart paper. And when people saw that leak planning tool, they went crazy. They saw, so what Diane said, they tied it to the leak page, and they saw how this was going to help educators in their districts. And for me, that was a turning point. Then everyone all of a sudden went, hey, these 2, something good is going to happen here. So that's what I remember about that first district partner meeting.
Well, and I think the important thing, most of them showed up the second day.
Yeah, that's right.
We honestly didn't know if they would come back.
We talked about that after day 1. I remember that. Do you think they'll come back? It's like, well, Diane's here, so I think they will. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to just reminisce a bit on my first visit. So Carl phoned me, right, March 8th, and he said, okay, we got this, or March whatever, before spring break. We got this. Off I went for training. And then he said, and I've got a person in mind to be the other teacher. So I came back from that training. I was working full-time at PGSS at that point. I had left the community and gone back to a school setting because I felt really out of touch with what was going on in the schools. So I went back to PGSS. Then I had to negotiate going half-time, starting right away with POPFASD to start getting things rolling. And so Carl says, I got just the person for this. He said, I want you to go over and meet Stacey Wakabayashi. I'm kind of going, okay. I did all my teaching at secondary. I did not know people in the elementary school system. So I think I phoned up Stacey and I said I'd like to come and visit. And he gave me a time to come and visit, and I was very prompt and on time. And I knocked on the door, and he opened the door, and the classroom the kids were spinning. Just spinning, and I'm going, oh yeah? Oh, this is great. And he said, he closed the door in my face, and he said, come back later. So to this day,
it was one of those days.
Oh, man.
I'll never, ever forget, because to me that just really emphasized Stacey's passion for putting the needs of his students first. And that has always, for the 12 years, 13 years, been the passion behind POPFASD. It's kids first. So, no, that was a real learning curve.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually I did get to meet him, and I was just so excited. I got to work with a hockey player who loved working with kids.
Yeah.
How interesting that, because I was familiar that Stacey Wakabayashi, after working for POPFASD, did part-time at Dutchess Park, and then just getting back into that classroom setting. And I did not know that about yourself, that you went back to PGSS. And I think that also adds to that authenticity to POPFASD, and that wanting to experience and to know what it's actually like in the classroom.
Yeah. And I think what Kathi said earlier about taking the information from the experts in the field, and I think when we talk experts, we not only mean, the medical people and the researchers in the field, but we're talking about the parents and individuals who live with FASD were really our true teachers. But it was about taking that information and synthesizing it, putting it back out there in a way that teachers understand. And I think it was so important that information was coming from experienced teachers. So important.
Yeah, we had the stories to tell because we just lived them. That story that I shared at Lakewood, with that kid. It was part of our daily reality, which really made a difference. And I think that's why the field, the experts accepted us.
Yes.
Because we were coming from the heart and from experience.
Yes.
We weren't just taking their work and translating it, but we were actually encouraging others to use that information.
Yeah. The other thing, your question around the early challenges and things, technology was a huge obstacle for us, and we were two people who never been in front of a camera, never had to create videos, didn't know how to do any of this stuff. And our tech at the time, Corey, was a trooper, and he took the time to learn all of that. But it really was a learning process. But I can remember spending hours to capture a 30-second opening for a video. And then having to go through the process of editing these things. I remember Kathi having to get her glasses tinted at some point because the glare off the lights was kind of affecting everything.
And then they banned me from ever touching any of the e-learning videos. And they said, no, you are not editing. Thank goodness. But no, I was thinking about that too, Stacey, and that early beginning and Corey's great attitude. He was a trooper to work with. We also had external help from Ron Jacqueline.
Right.
And Stacey, Corey, and I were so proud of our first e-learning video, and we sent it to Ron for feedback, and he just said, "This is horrible."
That was our feedback.
You cannot use this. This is awful. It's like talking heads.
Yeah.
So then we went overboard and started looking for very creative ways.
Yes. Yeah.
But, when I look at the website now, and I just marvel at what you folks have done as a team.
But still, out of all the videos that we have, my favorite is your secondary disabilities one
at
Otway with the skiing and connecting, trying to ski with poor equipment, poor instruction, that whole idea of poor fit, and then using the analogy of when you have good instruction, when you have good equipment, that everything falls into place. So making that analogy. So it's my favorite.
Neat.
We are having to change it because the terminology, we're moving away from secondary disabilities, and we're now referring to those as impacts. So we may have to have you come back and re-narrate at some point.
Skis.
Because we still want to keep that skiing analogy for sure. So we may have to have you come back and narrate.
No, that would be good fun. I just want to mention one other thing. So the first time that, in terms of the steering committee, so basically Bill Standeven, who was Ministry of Education, what was his title, Stacey?
He was director.
Director for special education.
Yeah.
So I believe he took it upon himself to connect with every single school district after we were awarded the program, and asked for volunteers to sit on the steering committee for 1 year. And again, we had it broken into geographic clusters. But my job was to bring these people together, and that was before You were
Yes.
around. You were still in the classroom. Carl had the halo on your head. And so I think it was Corey, Carl, and me who went to Vancouver. I had to organize this meeting. And everybody said, well, you have to have it in Richmond. It's cheaper than Vancouver. Well, I don't know Richmond. So I end up booking this hotel in the middle of nowhere. Because it was cheaper than Vancouver.
Oh, no.
And I still distinctly remember, again, poster papers on the wall, and the steering committee, I think it was a 2-day meeting, the steering committee going around and just writing their ideas about what they needed in terms of service, how that service would be delivered throughout the province, what they wanted in terms of resources. But it was, again, it was such a scary meeting. I'm thinking, thank goodness Carl is here, because he's got that provincial connection. I didn't know any of these people. They were all directors of special ed,
Right.
pretty much, or pretty close to,
Yes.
from around the province. And that was, that was probably one of the most anxious days of my life.
Yeah.
Was surviving the first steering committee meeting
Yeah.
in some remote location. And they all said to me, what are we doing out here? Because educators like to go to Richmond so they can shop. And believe me, there was no shopping where we were located.
Yeah.
So you take all these ideas from the steering committee and you create POPFASD, September 9th, 2006, International FASD Awareness Day. And did you envision then what POPFASD could be now? Now that you look at what it's the way that content is shared and presented, and how much it's grown and the impact that it's had. If you think back to 2006, could you envision what it's now?
Absolutely not. What you guys have done with what you all have, what POPFASD has done in terms of the whole tech piece. My expertise was the people piece, making connections with people. Stacey's expertise was, okay, we can make the connections, but we've got to give them the knowledge. What's the best way to give them the knowledge and the tools? So I'm just blown away. I was on the website about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Thank God you're finally getting a search engine. How many years?
It's coming, yeah.
Okay, because I was looking for resources for my niece, who's a teacher in Williams Lake. So it was really neat. I was able to go onto the website and look at the changes in the planning tool, look at the e-learning videos, and then look up the district partner, and I was able to send all that to my niece and say, here's what you need to do, here's where you need to go. And
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective because for me, I'm not surprised the way it's turned out because Kathi put us on the path to allow us to be where we are. And so to me, Kathy's kind of like the birth mom of POPFASD. Can I say that? Because she developed.
I'm not sure about that.
She developed. She nurtured. She molded this program early on and set the foundation just like a parent does. And when we got to that certain stage, she had us pointed in the right path. And the reason that I've remained here for the last 12 years is because that vision for me that came from Kathi and Carl was so important for me to see that vision happen. And so for me, I'm not at all surprised that it's turned out the way it has, because for me, that vision was made so clear right from the get-go.
And just to throw some numbers at you, just to put it into context, last year and within the recent years, it's around 2,000 to 3,000 teachers, educators, face-to-face that POPFASD presents to. Over 46,000 views on YouTube.
You're kidding.
From all across the world. That was 2016 stat. So the impact that POPFASD is having on the educators every year, every day, is massive. And so to think of sitting down next to you and Stacey, it's humbling to see how POPFASD has come from 2006, a small team struggling with tech, piecing things together, in these first workshops, piecing things together in these steering committee and trying to get these DPs to trust you, to the brand, the just what POPFASD has become today is just impressive.
Yeah, and I think when people think about POPFASD, I think what we established very early on is that we are a program that tends not to say no to people. And because very early on, what it became is educators across British Columbia, they view POPFASD as a program that won't say no. Instead, we'll say, well, we may not be able to do this, but here's what we can do. And I think that is such an important part of our culture, and that's how we're known. And, that's why many people out there refer to us as their favorite pop.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that all came from Carl. Positive, problem-solving, communicative, acknowledging that you're taking an interest and getting in touch with us, and sort of an immediate response. We worked long hours because we were just gratified with what we were doing. We loved the fact that somebody would contact us and say, help, I need to do this. Yeah,
and it's, there still hasn't been a year like our third year where it was 2008, 2009 that we broke a record for the number of workshops that we provided. But we finally did actually break that record a couple of years ago, but that was with 3 of us going our separate ways. So we will never come close to what we did in that third year because we did all of our workshops together. So we did 56 workshops together in 1 year. Wow. So I think the most I've ever done was maybe 30 in a year, because now we each kind of take our own districts and we kind of go off on our own, but that year will never match that amount. So
you still don't slow down. In the last 2 weeks, you've been in Dawson Creek, Maple Ridge, TRU.
Well, and I think at this point we should give a plug to Lynn McEwen, who is the glue that always held us together. And again, Lynn's response to anybody who emails or phones, no matter how frustrating. I remember the early days, we could never get the expense forms right for district partner training, and it would take Lynn months to sort it out.
It still does.
Oh no, but she never lost her cool with the person. She might lose her cool here, but she never ever treated anybody with disrespect or called or inferred that maybe their brain wasn't working correctly. No, it was always sort of, we knew when we were on the road that Lynn was running the show back here, and Corey as well. So
and Corey was, I think, a good person to have in place as a tech early on, because he was willing to do anything to support us. One of the pictures I have of Corey was going to one of the FASD Day events, and Corey and I were convinced to enter a relay where we had to carry a watermelon under our shirts, under our, against our bellies. And I still remember him running this course with this watermelon, wearing a jacket, and it was hot and sweating away. But then to have Matt Ferris join us for the last 6 years, he's really been the one who has taken this program tech-wise to a whole nother level and has allowed us to do to help meet that vision that the original team had for this program.
And I think your question about tech development, when you started doing the online courses, I mean, that was a huge step forward, and that was what was after, it was the year after I left.
Yeah,
that you
so
really,
about 2012.
Yeah. And an amazing technological advancement.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we've been very lucky in the program to have, the teachers who did come in came in at the right time. So Janet Honer with that whole online course piece. We had the great Sima Fuster join us, who brought in a whole different perspective for us and helped us move forward in different ways. We had Jody Sale come in for a few years to to really bring that classroom side. And now with our current team, with Meredith Curie and Stacey Kelsch joining us, really putting it together to kind of push forward this whole idea of not only just sharing the knowledge, but now focusing on having that knowledge be directly applied in the classroom. And that's kind of been our focus recently.
You know, when I look at the successes of POPFASD and why we've done so well, I think we need to plug School District 57 as well. So the provincial outreach programs receive a separate funding. It doesn't go into the School District 57 general coffers. So it's dedicated funding to the provincial outreach program. And for years, the early years, we had the undivided support of Bill Standeven, Lenore Gibbons, the accountant, Evan Hatch. We had many a conversation with Evan. And here within School District 57, Alan Reed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Alan would phone up and he would say, Kathi, I don't understand this. And I would explain it, or I would have to go to Alan, and he was fully supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that kind of support that really allowed us to try different things.
Yes. Yep, and it's been that way for years. And anytime an obstacle has come up, somebody in the district has helped us remove it. And it's a very different experience, I know, for some of the other programs. Yeah. So
just out of curiosity, do either of you have any specific memories of maybe an instance or an impact that you've had on a student or a family or a scenario from your time working here at POPFASD and how it impacted a family with a student with FASD? Because we go and we educate educators and we share this information, but I'm just wondering if there's any kind of, and we can cut this out for sure, but I'm just curious if there's any family or kid, or that what we're doing here makes a difference to what our goal is to providing that support for those students.
I think we did a lot of work. Can I use the last name? We did a lot of work with that family.
Yes.
Here in Prince George. And it was an opportunity to go into the home. But again, it was a reverse. We were learning from observing the mom and the kids as opposed to the other way. So I think your question, because our focus was dealing with the adults in the world, but when I look at some of the leak planning tools that the educators would complete, and then Stacey and I would go over each one of them from a workshop and give feedback. And then some of the action research that we did in the middle years, we were able to track kids over the course of a year. And we weren't directly involved, but we were getting the feedback from the district partners of certain high-profile kids within their district.
Yeah.
And that was so gratifying to see that the educational piece with the tools was creating a positive change.
Yeah, and I think it's because we do this work directly with educators that we don't often hear those stories, but we do get them. And I just had an education assistant from Richmond share with me a story of how she started as an education assistant, and her first student to support had a diagnosis of an FASD and had this history of going through a number of EAs because they weren't able to manage him. And so her first step, early on in her work with this young boy as a grade 3 student, was to take our online course. And she talked about how that impacted her in learning from not only us, but the other participants, and how that caused her to start in the right way with this young boy. And then she told the story. She shared this with me 4 years later, when this boy was graduating out of elementary school, heading to high school, and how very proud she was to watch this boy be identified as an award winner at their year-end assembly, and how gratifying it was to see him have success. And this was a young boy that nobody believed would make it, past grade 7, and here he was being a very successful person in his school. So we get stories like that all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so I guess we could kind of chat, go towards I wanted to have this question a little bit more organically. So is there anything else that we kind of, within that beginning, that we could talk about before I move into this question here? Is there anything else that you want to add to maybe the beginning or the middle of POPFASD?
I think in the middle, when we did the research project, I guess after about year 3, my question to myself was, and then to Stacey after I mulled it over, was, how do we know if we're making a difference? Like, the ministry's pumping all this money into us, we're flying all over the province, but is there any positive impact from this? So at that point, there was money available for research into fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and a sort of action research.
Yeah.
So I discussed with Anne George from the University of Northern BC, UBC Medical Faculty. I said, Anne, how do we figure out if this tool and if our workshops and if our mentorship is making a difference? And Anne said, well, you apply for money. Anne's very cryptic. You apply for money and you research and you get on with it, right? So anyway, we applied for money, received it, we being POPFASD, UNBC.
Yep. Through the Victoria Foundation.
Thank you. Yes, that was what was eluding me.
Yeah.
And a grad student, Erica, took this on as her PhD project. So it was a pretty intensive project.
Yeah.
And we worked with a number of teachers, I think 6 different teachers. Workshops, mentoring, in-class observations. For me, it was just horrendous because I don't do elementary school, and I had to sit and squat. Because Stacey said you have to look the student in the eye. You don't stand over the student and look down. So I had to learn how to survive in an elementary school.
Yes.
It was pretty tough.
Yeah, and so this was the mentoring project with the primary teachers that we ended up doing, and that was the project that started all of the mentoring work here that we've done since then. So I want you to know, Kathi, that because of that project and that work, we've continued that, so that almost every single teacher has been involved in a mentoring project in some way, and actually Stacey is currently doing the same mentoring work in his former school with 3 brand new teachers to teaching, and so sharing what he's learned from being in his school over the past 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's because what we're doing is we're now pushing it forward for what we really wanted to see after that study was done, which was how do we as a provincial program help district mentors to do that mentoring in their district. So we have a number of different projects going on now around that original research study.
Did the CARS research projects evolve from your action research?
Yeah, from the geoclusters.
Yeah.
So the steering committee brought forth the CARS idea, or was it
I don't
ideas?
remember how that happened, the geocluster projects, because initially the geoclusters, those action kind of research projects were regional. So we encouraged clusters of districts to get together and do a project. So a lot of them were around sharing general information about FASD, if I remember right. But I don't know how that came about. Yeah.
So we have POPFASD that has now evolved into a multifaceted program, online presentations, workshops, face-to-face presentations, workshops, CARS action research. What other items does POPFASD offer the educator?
Yeah, I think what we do is it goes right back to how we started, was building, understanding that nugget of information that Diane shared with us so early on. That's the key, is providing that information so that educators can then go off and do their work. We're just finding different ways of delivering that message using technology or face-to-face. And, it continues to be very well received. Yeah.
It's interesting. At one point, I remember the ministry in budget crunch times saying to us, you should not be bringing your district partners together for a 2-day training in Richmond. It's just not money efficient. And we argued through the teeth, black and white, and we said, what makes us different as a provincial outreach program is we have a connection. We know each and every district partner, and we strongly believe that by bringing people together, you build capacity. And everything was always about building capacity. And we won. I think we changed sort of the financing and the budget, and districts had to cough up a bit more money in order to allow this to continue to happen. But that was such an invaluable piece. So the steering committee was there, all of POPFASD was there.
Continues to be. And
it's that human connection. So it's, that makes such a difference.
Okay. So thinking about everything that POPFASD is composed of, all the different areas, all the different ways that we meet educators' needs from the past until now, what do you think makes POPFASD what it is? Like, what do you think makes it such a valuable and important program that has made just these the difference in educators' lives and in these students' lives? So what makes POPFASD
I'll jump in with the early, and then maybe you can update. Early on, it was back to this document: positive, proactive, acknowledging that people cared, human connection, problem solving. I mean, that was Carl's problem solving. Don't come to me at wide. Come to me, define the problem, and come up with a solution. So that was always hammered away at us. So I think it was that personal piece.
For sure. And for me, it's going along with that idea. For me, being a teacher, our district partners are our classroom. And so I approach our district partners just like I would my students in the classroom, where I know the importance of creating a connection with them is so important to the work that I do with them. We need to talk with them, recognize what their needs are, what their strengths are, and utilize all of that in coming up with ideas to support them better. So that's how I think the important part of our program is that we do approach this work as teachers, and that it's just that our students look a little different.
A bit more aged.
So anyway, I think Kathi probably has to go. I think she said something about an appointment.
But I could always come back. But I think one more, and it was reinforced for me recently on a committee with whom I do some work here in town. And instead of answering somebody with a no, always answering with a yes and. So the yes is, I acknowledge that you are not happy about something, and this is what I will do. And I think, that sort of summarized for me our work with POPFASD. We always answered with a yes, I hear you, and here's what I'm going to do. Or, and what do you want me to do about it?
And
so never a shutdown.
How can we help? For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Kathi Hughes.
Well, good luck, Stacey.
Thank you.
With this new endeavor.
I'll need it, but this was a great opportunity to hear the history and to hear how POPFASD was created and the ups and downs and the predominantly upward kind of trend that it's been going on, and how successful it has become because of you and because of the early members that have created such a strong foundation for this to be successful, and members like or educators like Stacey Wakabayashi, who's been here for 12 years to keep this ship going straight ahead. So it's been an awesome opportunity to chat with you guys. And is there any last things that you'd like to share before we sign off?
No. I'm done talking.
Kudos to Stacey for what's the right word? Steering the ship and providing the sanity for the last 12 years and not burning out.
No, what's helped me is just to go in any of those situations. what would Kathi do?
And my response would be, in any of those situations, and what would Carl do? So I think maybe one of your interviews should be with Carl.
Yeah, he's probably on
that's
the
right.
beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Enjoying life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. That's how it's going to go now. So now Stacey's going to go, what would Stacey do?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Kath.
thank you.
Thank you.